Hi, Aaron.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. It feels like a long time since we met for some reason. Does it seem like a long time since last Thursday, or is that just me?
It kind of does.
I'm trying to remember what we did last Thursday, which is disturbing. I should know that. But do you remember? Hi, everybody. Can someone refresh my memory? Because last Thursday seems like 100 years ago. What did we do? I know that I told Krista that I would. Well, no, Krista, you were able to make it to the last one, right? I think I was going to post last Tuesdays for you.
No, I was there.
For Tuesday too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That okay. Well, anyway, I'll go back over. And do you guys ever go through previous weeks? Um, you should, I guess. I mean, I know we're always moving forward, but especially with things going online, it's like you guys are paying. So why don't I mean, I could create a separate tool like on La Lima for videos that we've done. But I think that makes less sense than me putting videos up the appropriate week. It's just by the time I load them onto YouTube and render them and then link them, a lot of times we're wrapping up the week. But I want to create, I think some of those videos that we create together here are useful to you all, and it's like a resource you're paying for. So why don't I just say that I'm gonna put them up in the appropriate weeks where they fit. Um, but just remember that I'll be doing that. And so you can go back through, if you're working on a story or whatever else, and you want to go back to what we discussed or how we covered it, those will be there. I'm not going to do it comprehensively, but I think we probably have some worthwhile videos um, that I'll go back over and that I'll think are worth posting from what we've done already. So why don't I go ahead and do that? So okay, how is everybody? How's the work going for the class? Any questions, any thoughts? I just put up the latest assignment, and I think I've said several times already that I thought Suvan did a fantastic job with the class. And so, when I first looked at it, I really was like sucked into wanting to play copycat because she just had so many great resources up or whatever. But I've been tweaking it a bit. What she did for her week of interviewing was she just had the students look at like a New York Times story and a story from Maui News and dissect them. So she sort of said, what sources did these reporters reach out to for these stories, and what questions did they ask? Which I thought was a good exercise. But I also thought, we spent the last couple weeks first doing this place memo, and then you guys doing story development, which is something I kind of want to wrap up with our time today. This idea of story pitches. Um, and really, I think like a week on interviews should probably engage you in doing interviews. So instead of having you dissect a news story, what I've done is I posted a discussion for us about where I've asked you guys to share your own experiences about reaching out to sources, specifically one of the toughest and most important parts of that, which is cold calls. I don't know if all of you guys have done that or not. But I figured that, she'd done that last semester. I thought that was a worthwhile thing to do. But for this week, I thought I posted readings about interviews, including like how to reach out to sources, how to prep for an interview, and interview techniques. And I'm gonna say for next week, and by the way, I'm gonna make Fridays the deadlines from now on for everything, unless, with the caveat that unless we specifically need to prepare together for a discussion together, then I'll make a deadline of class time on a certain day, and I'll, give you guys plenty of heads up about that, make sure the time is reasonable. But otherwise, when it's like writing and doing reporting and stuff like that, I'm going to make every effort to just give you guys till the end of the week, like midnight Friday, to wrap up your work, because I just figure that's probably easier and simple. And, you know, Krista had said, and I totally, you know, like I said to you, I totally relate that you guys are getting all these online instructions all the time now, and it's a pain in the ass, I'm sure, to go through all the details of how you're supposed to turn everything in for each individual professor or whatever. But in the under the assignment section for every week, I'll try to be clear about where to put it, as well as in the checklist area. Um, and then I'll put the links to where you submit there. And, you know, essentially, I think there are three ways you submit, right? One is through an assignment link, one is through a forum, and one is through Padlet. Now, what can get confusing is that if it passes the final deadline, the link disappears. And I'm not sure that I can change that setting, actually, although I'll have to see. But so sometimes I get emails from students like, where was I supposed to submit this, when they're late with an assignment? Sometimes they're not that late with an assignment, just a few hours or whatever, but there's like nothing there. So just be aware of the fact that, you know, if you're not seeing a way to submit it, it's probably because the link disappeared, you know. And if you're not seeing one and you know it's ahead of the deadline, then definitely give me a heads up, because, you know, I'm not perfect. There's a lot of like settings that you need to change and set up for every single week that you do this. And if I miss one box, or, you know, get one date thing wrong, it screws the whole thing up. So you guys have to kind of help me, being my proofreaders and fact checkers, when there's something that doesn't make sense, and I'll just correct it immediately. Okay. So the final part of the assignment for this week is to conduct an interview. So what I'm going to say is, let's build on what you guys have done so far, which is, you know, you went out to visit a place, right, and wrote a description, which I'll give you guys feedback about. I think tomorrow I'm going to catch up on all my feedback and grading, or do my best to. So you'll have that. And then you guys did your story development based on that memo, right, for this week. How did that go with everybody? Did that work out? Did you feel like it was a worthwhile exercise? Did anyone not feel that way? I mean, you know, you guys are encouraged to give me feedback about it. Did anyone struggle with that? No? Okay. So what I'm thinking for the interview week is, it doesn't have to be about the place memo, but we're going to do an exercise again on story development here, but just on anything that you've developed as an idea, take it the next step forward. And I want to add that, you know, before you ever get to an editor, you need to take it this extra step forward, which is reach out to actual live sources and talk to them before you turn around and start talking to an editor. So do, you know, we call that maybe I call that like a pre-interview interview in a way, because what you're doing is you're reaching out to people with an idea, and you're saying, okay, you're a live person now. I've done some research about this. I fleshed it out a little bit, but help me out here in figuring out what this story is about. And so that's what I want you guys to do for this week. Like, do next Friday, not this Friday, but February 5th by midnight. Is just reach out, take one of your ideas, research it, right? Prepare for a pre-interview interview, then reach out to that person, conduct an interview, or however many people you need to reach out to until you get an interview lockdown. Then do the interview, flesh out your idea, and then write a pitch. Then as a reflection, I want you to, you know, I've identified different questions I want you to ask about what you went through in preparing that interview, by relating it to the readings that I've given you. So the readings deal with, how did you choose a source? How did you prepare for the interview? Um, how did you, you know, what techniques did you use for the interview? How did you get it down? Did you record it? Did you take handwritten notes? Did you do a combination of both? So that kind of thing. And they're, you know, the readings touch on that. And so I'm being a bit redundant with the readings, I look at some of them and I see different things I like from different textbooks. And I just sort of feel like a mix of them is really good. But I don't want you guys to feel like, I mean, this is an applied class, right? So the important thing to me is about the readings is just that you guys have the information and the guidance there as you need it. These readings are there to help you, not to bog you down in boring readings. Okay. So, if you skim it, I mean, I got to be honest with you. I've read all these things fairly carefully, but as I'm picking and choosing amongst all the different textbook chapters, I'm skimming them. Okay. And I think that's fine. They're skills oriented instructions. So I don't expect you guys to go over the stuff with a microscope. Just take what you need and reference that, so don't kill yourself in doing these reading reflections, but just try to make them practical and just, be honest. And you don't have to waste my time or your own time getting into it. The point is just point out where you actually learned something and where this is helpful. And that'll kind of help me with you guys and also with the future students. Is there any questions about that? Okay. So that's all up and accessible now for week 3 on La Lima. And I just want to add one last thing to prep for Thursday. And this is optional, but I kind of think class, like our Zoom class, could be more interesting if you do it. So let me add it to the chat, I guess. But what I want us to do on Thursday is watch a couple of clips of interviews, different kinds of interviews, and talk about what we learned from that, right? So I have some prepared and I'm going to keep looking at different ones, right? But let me just I think we'd have more interesting ones if you guys actually tell me what you like, what you picked up on. So let me give you some prompts for what kind of interviews might be really cool. And, just look for like a 2 to 5 minute, like 5 minute at longest clip of this kind. But let's look for the interview trap. Now, who can guess what I mean by the interview trap, like the trap type of interview? Does anyone have a clue what I mean by that? From what you've seen, in popular culture and everywhere else with interviews, what's the trap? Nobody has a guess, huh? Okay, you guys are gonna know what I mean when I say it. It's the gotcha interview, right? It's the one where it's live on TV, like 60 Minutes or whatever, and it's all kind of constructed to then like nail the guy at the end of the interview, right? So let's see if we can find an example of that. Okay. Now, how many of you guys think in Journalism 300 that's exactly the kind of interviewing I want you to get good at? No, because we're not TV, right? We're not doing 60 Minutes or whatever. But that's what everybody thinks of in popular culture when they think of the interview. So it's just good as a reference point to like, okay, well, this is sort of like what everybody has in their heads. Let's get that out of our heads so that, or let's look at everything by contrast with that, right? Because what we do is actually very, very different. So let's call the next type the basics. So what I would do with this, because I think this is, and a lot of this I'm operating, I mean, this is kind of referenced in the readings you're reading, but I'm operating but from my own experience. When I think about what I really needed to learn to get good at when I was a reporter for 10 years, one of them was there would be a breaking like news situation. Sometimes it was totally chaotic, which is great about being a reporter, is that you have breaking situations and it's a flood or a massive explosion or something like that. And you're just trying to get your head around the story. And so you've got to figure out, what do I ask here? Like, how do I walk away from this conversation with this person and have what I know I'm going to need to be able to communicate with, 50,000 readers or whatever about it, right? Like, what do I have to know if this person's going to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes? What do I have to walk out of there knowing? So can any of you guys find an example of like a great example maybe of where a reporter had to really think through, what do I have to ask in order to figure out what this is about? And it's not just breaking news, right? Sometimes it's like just a complex story and you're like, okay, wait, what am I writing about again? And so, before you go meet with the person, you have to figure out, what do I have to ask in order for people to know what the hell I'm talking about so that I'm not just writing gibberish, right? Um, okay, then the next kind of story would be let's call it the pivot. So can you find an example of where someone walked into an interview perfectly prepared, but then the interviewee said something completely unexpected or really important, and either the interviewer caught it and went with it and pounced on it and made a lot out of it, or missed it, which might be even more interesting to watch, right? Like I was watching, what's his name, who does State of the Union? That dude, break Tapper, what's his name? I'm blanking or whatever. Jake Tapper, right? And this was like last Sunday or the Sunday before, but he's talking to Anthony Fauci, and Fauci goes, and they're talking about the British strain, right? And Fauci goes, yeah, but we're looking at this one in South Africa that's probably more concerning and might be more severe. And Tapper didn't pause a beat, kept going about the British strain and what he already had as a script for it, and didn't go, wait, what do you mean? There's one in South Africa and Brazil. This one may be, because I think even Fauci had said something like this one may be more resistant to the vaccine or whatever. But Tapper didn't take a breath and pivot and go, what's up with this new strain? He just missed it. And so now we're off to another week. And it was days before we got any more information, and now they're starting to say, actually, there are questions about these variants and how resistant they are to vaccines and stuff. Fauci may have known that and may have been able to share that before, the public really got any information, but Tapper missed the opportunity to ask him about it. So look for the pivot, right? And then let's call this last one the casual. And what do I mean by that? You guys have any guess? Am I asking you to read my mind, or do you guys know what I mean? Claire, you have any idea what the hell I'm talking about with the casual versus the basics, the pivot?
Well, I mean, I guess I just guess that it's like a casual conversation or
Yeah,
something.
like something where you get somebody to open up or talk, or where it's, I mean, everybody bitches about Bill Maher and what an awful interview he is, but because a lot of times he'll bring on these people like Kellyanne Conway, or these people who just snow job him and overwhelm him, which is another thing. We could keep adding ones here, like the confrontation or whatever, where it's like a jousting match. But one thing that I think he does really well is that he not only gets people to open up and talk, but he when he makes provocative statements to them, it really is a conversation, because he's challenging them with ideas and with things to think about that then push them in directions where often they didn't expect to go. So if the pivot is where the interviewer is brought to a place where the interviewer didn't plan to go, a good casual can push the interviewee to go somewhere where that person didn't expect to go and open up. And the other way would be kind of, I think, what Claire was suggesting, which is like put the person at ease, right? And get them to open up, like a Trevor Noah type of discussion or something like that. So I'm gonna do my best to find examples. They're probably not going to be awesome, because I have to do a lot of multitasking, and to really find really good ones, I'd have to dig deep. I mean, Suvan shared a few last semester, which were pretty good, but I'd like to find different ones. She didn't do one about the trap, you know, but and she maybe didn't look at all of them the same way I am. But I think we would do better if everyone here had one that they could offer that they really liked and explain why you liked it. So, any questions about that, or any comments that anyone wants to share about it? No, you guys are good? Okay. All right, so let's do a storytelling exercise, or a story pitch exercise, and no pressure. Just let's see how it goes. Okay, so we'll see how well it does, and if it works and we get into an interesting discussion and some interesting ideas with it, cool. If we don't, that's cool too. Let's see how far we get and call it a day when we're done with that. Okay, so basically, what I want to do is share with you guys. I had posted for the story development stuff. A lot of you guys had me in 200, so you're already familiar with these two documents, right? But one was my list of where you get story ideas, right? Which is your interests. This one has been fruitful to me in the past, which is like things that really piss me off and frustrate me, which I realize, and then I'm fixated on, like maybe some entrance to a highway. Like, does anyone get pissed off getting onto UH1 right down at the bottom of the hill at University Ave? You guys know what I'm talking about? Like, that pisses me off. Like, I can't really see behind me, and I'm trying to enter UH1, and I'm always afraid somebody's going to drive right into me. And so a lot of times I'll skip that exit. So like, why would that be a story idea? Like, how would you develop that into a story idea? Does anyone know? Any of you guys, does anyone share that? Like, do you guys know what I'm talking about? Where you're getting on going east, at the bottom. You guys know which UH1 exit entrance I'm talking about, and you're trying to get on UH1, and it's very hard, and some cars it's like almost impossible to see the cars coming in the oncoming lane, right? So does anyone think that might be like, a little quick hit of a story?
I mean, it could be like an opinion piece, but it would be like I don't know what the news would be unless they do something about it, or like unless it's like a general complaint that that everyone has, like collectively, like maybe like a forum or like a, yeah, I don't know.
Well, there may be a way to kind of, file complaints like that, and there may be a way to get them. But I was just thinking, I wonder if there's been a lot of accidents there. If there hasn't, then maybe it's just my own little bee in my bonnet, and I'd get over it. But
I think there definitely has been a lot of accidents there.
really, why do you say that? That's interesting.
I've gotten one there.
Well, that's interesting.
On that, yeah.
So this is how stories develop, right? That's interesting. Like, we just
And I've passed by a few times where I've seen at least two that I've passed by.
right there.
Yeah.
Because I've heard that about the bottom of Punahou, but I've never brought up this thing about H1. That's another spot, right? And I don't really know where people mean, but I hear moped people talk about that a lot. But it's anyway. And then, so something pisses you off about a dangerous intersection, then maybe you realize there are ones that are a lot worse. Maybe you do like a top worst, like a listicle of the worst ones in Honolulu or something, and why. So there's a lot of places, but the point is it all generates with, something that freaks you out or pisses you off or whatever. And you ask, who else is this an issue for? You know, I would imagine, Aaron, that if you get in an accident there, it's a bad accident, right? Because that's a highway with cars coming right at you with no time to stop on a highway at a high rate of speed, like on an interstate. So it's not, you know, was your accident bad?
It wasn't too bad. No.
Yeah. But I imagine, so it was somebody you were getting on and someone smacked into you?
No, it was like someone was trying to merge on and then the person that was still trying to merge on behind too
Yeah.
wasn't like paying attention in front. They were looking behind at the freeway, like cars coming.
Yeah, that could be really bad, something like that. So okay, so that's one of them. You know, reading newspapers and magazines and all other sources you can get your hands on. Talking to people, I gotta tell you, I mean, maybe I'm just lazy, but this has gotta been. How many for you guys find this is maybe your top way of getting story ideas? Talking to people, like things that you heard, things that came up in conversation. I mean, I got a lot of my best ideas that way. Covering a beat also is huge, but we're not really there yet. So that's one we'll have to really, I think, talk about later. Except a few of you have covered beats, you know, like I know at least a couple of you have. So, you know, something to think about. It's not too early for y'all. Um, you know, observation, right? Just looking around. Um, and which I think is really interesting and one we can jump on right now. Looking for fine print in documents. Maybe we can find a cool way to have fun with this one this semester. Oh, which by the way, not to go off topic, but which reminds me, um, so I'm going to try and wrap up the letter to the zoo. I have it on my list of things to do, but basically that's dead in the water for us, right? I mean, unless we do a public information mission on that, which I do think we should do regardless. Um, but you know, as far as getting the Honolulu Zoo Society to cooperate on a data story, that's not happening. So we may be able to get something from them or from the zoo itself, from you know, public information. But if you guys, I'm going to reach out to Yuhyun at Civil Beat to say, do you have any ideas for a good data and documents story? There's also someone at the UH library I'm going to probably ask about this, and there's a couple of other sources. But if you guys, you know, now we'll be doing this in March, so we have a few more weeks to get it together. But if you guys have a data story that you're particularly interested in, I mean, Nate, you already have. Are you going to mention the one, you know, with the class you're working on?
Oh, something totally different. I wanted to see if we could try to get data on dog scams and like people that are reporting um like puppy mills and stuff, because that was a story I wanted to look at and I feel like it hasn't been covered at all. So I don't know if you'd get that from like BBB or um like the Humane Society, but I don't know. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, why don't we? I'll tell you what. Why don't I create a Google Doc on our shared drive, and we'll put that up first, and then I mean, what we've got to do is, you know, if we have favorite ideas, we have to start digging a little deeper into them to find like the answer to your next question is, okay, that's a good idea, but where do we find the data? You know, and so let me do that right now before we forget. But you know, I'll also check in with Yuhyun and with Claire at the library, Claire Sinclair, and with you know, I'll just kind of make the rounds, see who has ideas about what we can do for a data story. But it's a good one, Nate. I like that idea. I mean, I like, you know, I like stuff that we don't have to think about whether we care about it or not. You know, and that's definitely one. I mean, I'd imagine you're not the only dog fan among the group. Personally, I'm a cat person, but I grew up with a dog, so I totally get it. And I get to, you know, I love dogs too. Just some dogs more than other dogs. But anyway, so we want to do, how should we put it, Nate?
I was actually working or trying to. I was talking with Professor Opegard about this story, but it's essentially like we both found because my dog died in like October, and we've been trying to find a new one or like a puppy. And I guess the story. I also did like stuff on like I was just like talking to friends and like online and stuff too. Like I did some polls, but like there's a lot of dogs scams, like people that are trying to get a puppy and they'll get like a mutt or they won't get anything at all. Or there's like puppy mills. And then it's also just like because Oahu and Hawaii in general, it's so isolated. There's like a really bad supply chain, and so there's like a really big dog shortage. And then plus COVID is like
Yeah.
so we figured out that's like a big story, and no one really covered it. And I thought it would be cool. And then there's also a bunch of news stories about I think it was the Better Business Bureau. They were saying like dog scams are up, like they're already high and they're up even higher because of COVID. So we wanted to like look at that
Well,
story.
I think maybe we might be better off casting a wider net at first, because now that you mention it, you know, there are all these challenges to obtaining a dog in Hawaii. You know, like these friends of mine wanted I'm forgetting what they're called now, but it's a something doodle, a lab doodle, I think. Um, and it's like impossible if you live in Hawaii to get a lab doodle because everybody wants a lab doodle, and there's only so many breeders in Hawaii. And so then you have to go to the mainland, and then that gets a lot more complicated if you live in Hawaii, because of quarantine and all the other reasons. So maybe we're better off. What do you think, Nate? Are you open to the idea of casting a wider net and dogs? Dogs in Hawaii, like, you know, because maybe we could do like maybe it would make more sense to do like a roundup story about the concerns of puppy mills and the concerns of like it seems like the demand is so much higher than the supply and all the issues that raises. I don't know. What do you think?
I know it's not easy to get a cat, so I don't know. I just thought dogs were,
And by the way,
but it could be pets.
I'm really sorry to, you know, to hear that about your dog. I lost my cat Snow Boots a couple years ago, and you know, it's really intense thing to go through. So sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. It sucks.
Yeah. So maybe we should put, how should we put this? Dogs, puppy mills, high demand, low supply, and other concerns. Dogs in Hawaii. So let's just call this records and data ideas. And it's in our shared drive. And so if you guys have ideas, just put them there, and I'll try and set a date for when I'll try and run some of this down to see if, because I do think it's an important part of the process to find the data sets. But if we get all bogged down with all 6 of us trying to find data sets, then, you know, we're not going to do anything interesting with the story. So unless that turns out to be like an important part of the exercise, but I think I'd rather us have at least a few data sets where we know to go, and then, you know, a challenge in terms of what to do with the data once we know where it is and why we're looking at it, or have at least an idea of why we're looking at it. Okay, so getting back to these lists, you know, I think this is a lot of fun, and maybe we could do this as a story together, where I give you guys a document. I mean, I think a few of you guys have heard me tell this story before, but 2 examples of stories I've come up with by just going through really boring documents was one where I was handed, I mean, it was literally like this thick. It was like 500 to 1,000 pages. It was the New York City budget, annual budget for the year. It's just this massive document. And you know, I don't know what kind of a fortune our professor back when I was in grad school for journalism back 100 years ago spent on the copies, but he like thumped down copies for everybody in the class and said, go through this and find a story. With no more guidance at that. And I just thought, oh God, and he started using examples like porta potties in Central Park and just fire hydrants. I was just like, you got to be kidding me. I'm going to do a story about porta potties or fire hydrants. Like, I don't know. And so I kind of opened it with that idea in mind. And the first thing I saw was Congo gorilla forest and just a line with a number. And the number was $350 million. Literally a 1,000-page document. I opened it up and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like we're in New York City. This says Congo gorilla forest, $350 million. Like, what the hell is that? And so I called the department, you know, I think there was a department there, and lo and behold, it was a brand new $350 million gorilla immersion exhibit. It was like the next generation of zoo exhibit at the Bronx Zoo. And the Bronx Zoo is, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, was a lot more open than the Honolulu Zoo, because I picked up the phone, I made one call, I was a student, I said, I'm a journalism student at NYU. And the curator of the zoo was the one who answered the phone and said, yeah, when are you free? I'll like walk you through. And so I went and met this guy with a tape recorder, and he walked me through this $350 million brand new exhibit before it opened up, which I don't know, maybe that explains my fixation on zoos for y'all. But it, you know, so I ended up breaking a story that, you know, later dozens of magazines and everybody else wanted a piece of, but I wrote it first. And then another example is just, I was, when I was a reporter in the Florida Keys, we found a mention of like Santeria and voodoo ritual, like just, it was in like a Parks and Recreation document, and it was about remains from these rituals in the parks. And it became like kind of the news hook for a really great story about voodoo and Santeria in South Florida. Because people, it turns out, were doing, you know, the Parks and Rec were reporting rituals about it. So crazy stories that you got from really dry government documents, right? Then Craigslist, or, you know, postings on social media, that's kind of a weird offbeat way to find really good ideas. Social media in general is good like this, just like talking to people is good like this, right? And neighborhood bulletin boards, I'm thinking of just places where, like, I don't even know if there really are that many. Does anyone have like a local place where people actually post flyers, like non-digital stuff like the old days? So anyone even familiar with that? Maybe not. You see stuff on telephone poles or electric poles, right? But maybe not. So then, okay, then there's Brett's list, which is pretty close, like observation, talking to friends and family. This one's good. Annual traditions. So anything coming up with, I don't know, we've got Valentine's Day, I think, is like the next big holiday, right? So social issues, like more thinking about issues, regionalizing or localizing stories, events, which kind of overlaps with the annual traditions, public meetings, which I don't think a lot of you guys haven't done any meeting coverage yet, so that may be kind of beyond our horizon right now. Publicity seekers, I mean, I think that could be like social media influencers maybe, or other people that are kind of up and coming or who are local that you guys know about, and synthesizing ideas, maybe like putting them together. So what I want to do is, let's do like little 2-minute breaks here. Does everybody have like a notepad or somewhere to just brainstorm for a minute? And let's start with, let's do like little 4-minute drills, right? So let me give you guys 4 minutes to just meditate on and write down anything you've observed. You know, maybe think like last 24, 48 hours if you've been out and about. I know with COVID, you know, I'm like a shut-in, but you know, think about where you've been out and about, you know, over the weekend, over the last couple of days, over the last couple of weeks, where you saw something that led to an idea that prompted ideas. You know, maybe you have to brainstorm. Maybe you saw something that reminded you of something, you know. So like for me, I thought as soon as I tried to do this exercise in my head, I said, well, I went out to dinner have you guys been out to this place in Istanbul? And I thought, oh, they're a brand new restaurant. Like, first of all, it's weird that they're totally packed. And there doesn't even seem to be that much social distancing going on there or whatever. But like, you know, why? But also then I thought, oh, they're a new restaurant that opened during COVID. And then I talked to a friend of mine who's like, dude, that restaurant's been there like a year or two. That's not new. But then I thought, well, okay, but are there new restaurants opening during COVID? And isn't that weird? Like, Nate, this is kind of your beat. Are there actual new businesses opening up right now while all these other ones are falling down?
Yeah. I don't know. I've really focused on ice cream businesses, and there's a lot, surprisingly. There's a lot of people doing like sorbet and stuff, but I don't think they're gonna last very long.
Yeah. So, you know, so that's a story idea, but that's an example, right? Of just something simple that I observed that then, and I had to maybe brainstorm a little bit or free associate a little bit, but it eventually is going to lead to a viable story idea, right? So so I'm going to start the clock now. It's 11, is it 11:12? So 11:16. Let's see what you guys have down. But then before we hash that one out, we're going to move on to the next kind of idea prompt here. If you can't think of anything, don't freak out. You know, we'll do some of these other ones. How's 4 minutes? Too long? Everybody looks like they're still thinking, so good. That's completely messed up, Nate. That's a great story. But you're jumping the gun, dude. You're like I used to be in these story meetings. People would be like, why don't you shut up and stop pitching stories? You're just creating, every time you pitch one, the editors are assigning it to you. You're just creating work for yourself. It's like, because I can't stop. You know, you're like that. You like can't stop coming up with story ideas, which is great.
I used to work there. It was like the worst job. And like now they're like forced to like be all covered up and like try to work with all these like tours. I don't know. I couldn't imagine working there.
I mean,
I hated it.
if we had a local publication with a lot of attitude, I could see the headline being the Petri dish. You know?
It was already gross before the pandemic. Now it's just like disgusting.
Oh, don't even tell me that. And like my ex-girlfriend had like a tween daughter, and people, like tweens love, like, oh, let's go to I'm glad I didn't know that when I took them, that it's how gross it is from behind the scenes. perspective, because they had fun, but they had no idea probably how disgusting it is.
Yeah, they I don't know. I didn't like it.
Yeah. Well, that's also a good example, kind of like your puppy mill thing of, if it's pissing you off or if it's concerning you, there's probably a story, right? You're drawing on personal experience for really good story ideas.
Yeah, I'm not really like passionate or pissed off about it. I just think it'd be a funny story or an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be like, I mean, I'm not particularly pissed off about the entrance to, H1. I just think it's, I usually just drive around it, but I mean, an idea is an idea. Like, I'll take it, right? All right. So let's move to the next thing. Okay. So your interests. Okay. So write down at least 3 interests you have. And then, with the remaining time you have for the 4 minutes, see if you can continue to free associate about how those lead to to story ideas. So like my 3 were animals. When I tried to do these exercises because I wanted to see how hard or easy it would be for you. So my 3 ended up being animals, Americana, and what was the other one? Snorkeling and diving. And I mean, they're not like, 3 of them. I mean, yeah, they're kind of passions of mine, but point is, they don't have to be your like 3 most intense, just things that you kind of love or you really like that, lead to other ideas that something about.
Is this like beside our story ideas that we just came up with? Like this is like another thing. Okay.
Yeah. Try and use 3 interests as a way to come up with, more stuff. Because this is all, we're going somewhere with this, Krista. Okay. So it's 11:17 through, so 11:21. See if you can come up with interests you haven't, like Krista, you already know you're interested in politics. So think about things that you're interested in and you're like, oh yeah, I really love that too. You know what I mean? Like Aaron, no, you can't write down sports because we know about that one. Well, you can write down a sport. How about that? If that helps. Okay, one more minute. How's these 4-minute things? Good? You guys want less time, more time? Just about right? Okay. Okay, so last one. I guess we'll do, my prompt is either talking or like a conversation y'all have had that led to an idea, or something you saw on social media. That's my prompt. But you know what? If you like something better here and would rather go with one of these other ones, let's say you can do that too, right? So let me put my thing and Brett's thing alongside each other. So if there's another one of these that you like better as a prompt, you know, you're not gonna get arrested for using that as a prompt instead. So 4 minutes. It's 11:22, so 11:26. You're always fussing. What? Didn't you get breakfast already? Okay, guys. So I was about to send an email to you all with these the pivot. Do you guys have, well, I'll send an email just so you have it on record somewhere, but with these ideas for interviews, if you guys have any you want to share with me. But okay, now what I want you guys to do is just 2 more minutes and look over all of your ideas and choose your favorite one. I'll give you just 2 minutes to look everything over and then share it with the group. Okay. So I just sent you guys that stuff about the interviews. But all right, does anyone want to go first?
Sure.
Okay, what do you got, Ethan? You find anything you were excited about, first of all?
Maybe something I've been passionate about, or at least I grew up just in like the environment I grew up kind of affected my choice to talk about this. But in Kailua, there's this tour company, and they're known for their yellow boats, and they always like go into Kauhau or like Kailua Bay. Kauhau is Lanikai Beach. Um, but they do like tours and stuff, and like they'll just send fleets of them to like out to the mokaluas, and it interrupts the environment kind of like in a negative way, just because that there's a lot of wildlife out there that need their space, like the monk seals. And when you send tourists out there, they kind of have like a lack of knowledge of the environment around them, so uh, they'll probably breach that space that these animals need. But more specifically, I wanted to talk about how they've been increasing tours during the pandemic, because like they shut down maybe during the mandatory quarantine, but now they're back up and running. And I wanted to see like where are the people taking these tours coming from? Are they flying in to take these tours? And like, is it a bad idea to even run the tours? Um,
So do you think you'd be able to do a pre-interview interview on that this week?
I think so. I used to work there
Okay.
before the pandemic. So I know like the managers, I know the owner really well. Um,
Maybe the ideal first interview, what do you think the idea, if you could interview anybody, any type of person for the story, type of source, what would be the ideal one to start with? Given,
Locals in the area, maybe.
oh, that's a good one. I was thinking, an advocate or an activist who's a critic.
I have a person in mind, yeah, who
Yeah,
was also an ex coworker there.
I would maybe, is that person like inform, like, are they an active,
She's well informed. Yeah, she's a part of the Oahu lifeguard county, like that whole program, and she's like, yes, she's very well knowledge. She's worked with NOAA and all that.
right? So then that, I might start with that person,
Okay,
getting back to the idea of the basics interview,
right.
you know? I mean, I think everybody here is going to basically be doing the basics interview, although the basics interview that you think you may be doing for this may turn into what? It may turn into the pivot, right? Where
Hmm.
they say, you go into it thinking you're working on one story, and then they say something that makes you realize, oh, there's either a much bigger story here or there's a different one that's better.
Right.
Um, so, okay, who wants to go next? Did anyone get totally stuck? No, I didn't think so. Aaron, did you do okay?
Yeah, I can share mine.
Okay.
Mine is like kind of random actually, but I was thinking about my interests and how there's a lot of people that have been on TikTok during quarantine and how it became really popular. And so there's this one, um, I guess user that he's from Hawaii and he talks about like skincare products and like cosmetics and all that. And his influence on like his viewers is like ridiculous. Like people absolutely trust him. And so if you go to certain stores with like the products that are like his favorite or he really recommends, they're like sold out everywhere. And I think it's so interesting his influence on like his viewers.
I think that's fascinating. Like the incredible power of social media. We're in the political sphere. We're so used to talking about that with Trump, but it totally makes sense that outside of politics or outside of Trump, there's this phenomenon, right, of people who just are. I mean, you could draw an analogy with talk radio. Going back to the days of the 30s when people had this like terrifying power over their audiences, right? Through just getting on a microphone. But, this is sort of a similar kind of thing. I think that you've got something which is a great, maybe local story, but like with a lot of these, and I think Ethan's might be the same thing. It's like, you always want to be thinking, what's the bigger story here? What is this really a story about? So yeah, that sounds fantastic to me. What do you guys think? I'm kind of can feel like like I'm jumping in as soon as somebody says something. What do you guys think about Ethan's or Aaron's idea? Can any of you guys think of other social media phenom like this locally or whatever, who just are such a big deal?
Uh, I know with specific like a skateboard brand that like everybody is running nowadays, and like our local skate shop has even like took out inventory to replace it with certain boards and certain merchandise that this company puts out. So they're just like the lead.
Is that
Mm.
tied to an individual who has particular charisma, Ethan, or is it people just love the brand?
I think it's the team riders that really push the image of the brand. It's not really the brand putting out like certain commercials or certain thing. It's just it's the yeah. I guess you could say it's not one specific, but I'd say a few specific people that really represent the brand.
So that might be another way to approach it, Aaron, is to blow it out a little bit. I mean, I think, and again, I guess I would ask, is this something you're interested in enough to make it your interview for the week?
Yeah, possibly.
And who would that one interview be? This this dude?
If I could get in touch with him, yeah, maybe. Or I was thinking even like store employees, seeing if how many customers that they've encountered that have come in because of his recommendations.
Yeah, or business owners that work, that are, that have had a particular perspective on this, you know. Okay, let's see. Which you guys wants to go next? Claire, how'd you do?
I can go. Oh, okay. never
Sorry,
mind.
go ahead, Krista. We'll get to everybody else.
No, it's okay. Okay. I was kind of thinking about the flooding yesterday, and we've had like 2 consistent Mondays that there's been like really heavy rains on Oahu. And it's common, it's just a winter thing. But one thing I noticed is that like Manoa Valley every single time gets flooded consistently. Like every intersection gets like, I don't want to sound dramatic, but it was like up to my car's bottom like door panel, so like there was like water. I mean, take it, I shouldn't have driven through it, but it was like at least like a foot or 2 of water. So I want to know like what, like why, if Manoa Valley is like one of the wealthiest valleys in Oahu, like why aren't they, and like very community driven, why aren't they like using their community action to like fix this problem? Or is there even a fix? So I don't know if it's like an environmental article, like is there even a fix? Is the valley like able to drain out all of this water, or like are we just not doing anything about it?
No, I think that's a great one. You know, I hadn't even thought about that because I live in Manoa too, and have definitely encountered what you're talking. I mean, it's a serious problem because, you know, you were saying, well, I shouldn't have driven through it, but you know, if you're in traffic and there are cars behind you, what are you going to do? And you have to get there. There a lot of times there's not another route, right?
Yeah, I'm specifically talking about like the intersection of like the 2 Manoa roads, that like the one goes to Safeway, the one like goes down University.
Yeah,
It just like is
it's
a
always
huge
terrible. Yeah.
ditch. Yeah, and it's an issue too, because if you drive in it, then the water gets in your engine and you can completely like ruin your car. So
You know, there's nothing, I mean, I think because of the nature of the way you guys have been taught so far and who you've had to work for, the idea of doing quick turnaround, you know, focused stories is not been like the way you've been pushed to go, but it's really, really important skill. I mean, if you're ever working for a news organization, you know, they're going to want you to be crackerjack at that. So there's nothing wrong with like, you know, with taking a bite out of something where there's a lot of different angles, because that makes sense as a hard news story for that day. And if you do want to do all the other coverage, you got to do that story first. You know, really, you know, unless you're getting paid the big bucks to take weeks for every story you write, you know, you gotta knock out one story and then worry about the bigger story. So maybe what you want to write is um like about that one intersection, you know, just a simple story about that, or about the major problems in Manoa. You know, a broader story would be about the worst places like that in Honolulu, you know, or about, like you said, about why is this the case with these terrible ones. But those could easily be stories down the line if you do an initial story about what is up with this intersection and the flooding there. You know, I got stuck in one at Whole Foods last night, and it was kind of terrifying. You know, it's like I'm like driving through it. I don't know if if my car is going to get wrecked by it, or if I'm going to get stuck in the middle of it, you know, or what. So, I mean, and that's how, you know, with flash floods, that's how cars get carried away and people die. So, anyway, so yeah, that's a great story. Um, so Claire, how did you do with the assignment?
I'm not really sure if I came up with like the right style that you were looking for, but like all the stuff that I'm really interested in is more like research type stuff. But like I'm pretty interested in like natural health and like natural healing practices. And I used to work with like some lady at like a juice bar, and she was like a health guru type person. And I've actually interviewed her before, but I was thinking like I could do like a story on like how like natural health and like healing practices can help with like physical, mental health stuff, especially during like the pandemic.
Well, so it's interesting what you just said, because you said my interests are more like research, right? And I didn't want to give a whole speech about each of these little bullet points, but the reason why, does anyone, some of you guys have had me enough that you've heard me give this rap before. Why are interests such a good source for story ideas? Do you guys remember us talking about this, or do you have your own ideas about it?
Well, I feel like if you're interested in it, you're gonna put more work into your writing and whatnot, and finding the information to make sure your story's
That
accurate.
is true. Yeah, that's true for sure. That's definitely one important aspect of it. And also, like, what is the fact that you have that passion and that extra investment? How is that an asset to you as a journalist? I mean, it might be in terms of the quality of what you write, right? Which is somewhat obvious, but how else, in terms of your specific job as a journalist, is that an asset? You guys get what I'm getting at? What I'm getting at is that, in order to be good as a journalist, you need to be deeply up to speed, right? And you also need to be breaking news. You need to be doing stories about stuff that other people aren't doing stories about. And so, Claire, when you're really interested in something like health products or whatever else, you know of stuff going on in that area before the rest of the public knows about it, I would think. You at least know the questions to ask or where to look for that stuff, right? To pull it in. Do you feel that's true?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like, I guess I pay attention to that kind of thing more than a lot of people, and I
So,
see like a lot more.
right. So all you have to do then is combine the depth of your interest with this idea of you remember we went over last week, or I asked you guys to go over, which we'll keep doing, but the news drivers. And so one of the main news drivers, right? The main news driver in news is timeliness, right? If it's not timely, it's not news. So what you have to do is kind of combine what your interests really are with asking yourself, well, what of this stuff is really timely? What's new? What's changing? What's different? Right? Does anything come immediately to mind with that? With, like, say, you know, like, what was it, like skincare products?
No, not really. More just like eating practices and
Yeah.
like homeopathic remedies, stuff like that.
So is there anything really cutting edge or new that people are talking about with it that's
Well,
interesting?
there is kind of like this new diet that's going around. It's like they call it like the raw carnivore diet. And one of the people that I follow on Instagram, she's like starting it out. And she's like promoting this diet off of like how she feels off of it, not so much off of like actual research that's been done on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking like she was like promoting like brain clarity, stuff like that, but she's also having like a lot of nutritional deficiencies. So I was just thinking
Yeah, I
like that
think
kind of stuff.
those are all, I mean, you find out that this is happening. So I mean, I think one of the first questions you need to answer about it is, how popular is it, right? Because if you want to say, oh, this is a new thing happening, then you need to know, is it a new thing happening? Is it one person on Instagram, or is it like is it a phenomenon? And if it's a phenomenon, how big a phenomenon, right? So that's an important first thing to deal with. And then it sounds like as soon as you've kind of gotten some clarity about that, there's all of these other issues that are coming up. Are you, I forget what you told me. I know I've asked you this, but are you in Hawaii now? You are, right?
Yeah, I am.
So is there a way to localize it? Do you think?
Yeah, probably. I don't really know too many people around here, and I mean, I guess it's kind of hard to figure everything out this quickly because I've only been here for 3 weeks.
Yeah, there's a real learning curve involved with that for sure. But I guess what I would say is, do you feel confident that you know somebody you could reach out to as a first interview to develop the story idea?
I think so.
I
I
mean,
mean,
one,
I have like a few friends back home from where I'm from in Iowa, and I could like connect with them like through Zoom or something.
yeah, I mean, if you want to do the raw carnivore diet thing, you might be able to reach this influencer and interview that person, or if you can find kind of the real source of this, maybe somebody invented it or introduced it, and that's like, is this the actual source, or is there an even more primary source than that, and that could be your first interview, or maybe to try to find that cross section between this thing and somebody locally that you could see, like someone with one of the major health food markets or restaurants here that that would be willing to do an interview about that diet here. And again, back to the idea of the pivot, you can kind of rummage around, you can tweak things so that it'll work, so that you get the right interview, because maybe the inventor of the raw carnivore diet is not available, but you realize there's a closely related idea or another really interesting idea where you can get that interview in the next week, right? So, okay. So Charleston, how about you?
Let me just pull up my note real quick. I had- Yeah, so there's a few stories that have been recent too. Like one of them that, as far as when it comes pertaining to specifically sports, specifically football, when it comes to UH, that they're going to be moving onto campus, which is really interesting because how is that going to affect not only their sales, because now that they're on campus, but how's it going to affect student experience? Because for the longest time, we've been the only college where football wasn't on campus. So that's a huge thing for the school. Um, Another thing that I did for that one assignment, for assignment two, I went to the North Shore and was checking out the large swells that weekend. So I was doing that for my memo as far as the scene. And there was a lot of people at the beach and whatnot, and just in the North Shore in general. So I figured, how does that impact residents, especially on the North Shore? How does that impact the owners, the store owners, any business owners up that side, especially with bringing tourists with the large swells during this pandemic as well? Because as you go to the beach, you notice that there's no mask, which I mean, it is an open area, so you necessarily don't have to be wearing masks. Well, we wear social distance, so that's a good thing. And the other one that I had was the legalization of marijuana recreationally. That's something that's being talked about in the news a lot. And also saw something that piqued my interest where it says that they might be wearing masks till spring of 2022. So it's another thing that's piqued
Yeah.
my interest.
Or maybe longer. I mean, now they're talking about these variants and, that the vaccines aren't going to work. I mean, how long are we going to be with this damn thing? I had told Nate, I might as well, God forgive me. I'm about to tell a room full of journalists, but I had told Nate that I had heard from our chair that we may not be. It's sounding like we're not going to be having classes on campus this fall. You were still going to be online, which seems to me like the rest of the country is going to have classes in person, and we're not. Which would be another. How's that? How well is that going to work for the university? Like we're going to be the only, I mean, isn't that going to discourage a lot of students from signing up? Because, you know, they'd rather just go somewhere where they can actually go to school.
Yeah, I would say so, because there's definitely some classes that I just feel is better to be in person for, because it's just more hands-on
Yeah.
types of class.
So, okay, you have a bunch of good ideas there, Charleston. I mean, now the challenge is who's that first interview that you would do to develop the story pitch, you know?
Mhm.
Oh, we're past time. I'm sorry. I thought we had plenty of time, then we don't. Nate, you want to just quick give us, you got the water park one, which I think is a great idea, but did you come up with another one just through this process?
Since we're talking about like breaking news, they're trying to build a wave pool in Eva, and I thought it'd be interesting to see what the justification is to building a wave pool in Hawaii.
Yeah, what is a wave pool?
It like makes waves that surfers can ride, and
So
it's really
like,
it's really expensive. Like it's 19 acres, and they're building it on state land. But to like rent it, you have to. It's like $370 or something, and I don't know. It just is a weird story because like no one's gonna use it, especially out here.
yeah, it's bizarre. Yeah, it's a good story. Okay, so I'm sorry to have hold you guys up. I got caught up in the conversation, but you know, let me know if you guys have any questions. I sent you an email saying send me you know, clips of interviews that you want to talk about, and I'll see you all in a couple days. All right. All right. Take care.